Have any of you ever been in a church where someone tried to take it over? I have. I was in one in Berkeley. This guy came up in front and wanted to correct us all and tell us all the Bible was just written by humans and we're all crazy if we believe this. And da-da-da, and we had to cool the guy's jets a little bit, and we spent over an hour talking with him later. Anyway, this is an interesting book, David Limbaugh. If you haven't looked at this, pick up a copy, go to the library, and just read a few pages. Most of the stories are in this are between a half a page to 2 pages long. This will raise the hair on your back of your neck. You won't believe these things are happening. But the alarm clock is broken. The media, the news media, they don't care about religious persecution. They don't care what's happening in the schools if a teacher throws Bibles away or if something happens to the church. Folks, you should look at this here, because we're not. Look at this book. Take a look at it. David Limbaugh, Persecution. I'm just going to read you part of one of these stories here. In April 2002, a California Superior Court judge refused for the second time to bar an allegedly disruptive woman named Lady Kate Barile from the Church of Christ in Hollywood. After she repeatedly disrupted church services, the church notified her in February of that year that her membership in the church was terminated and she could no longer enter church property. She ignored the request, continued to appear and disrupt, calling church officials Satan's agent when the church had originally... Anyway, so it goes on down. They appealed to the courts for relief. We have the right, this is private property. And what the court said was that she was exercising pure speech. She's exercising pure speech, and if they block her, they are the ones who are wrong. Okay, and so finally, a legal group, a Christian legal group, started getting involved and trying to help them. Still, it got denied. So the woman could come, tear things off bulletin boards, could do whatever she wanted. Again, the court denied the church's request for an injunction. Appealed to the decision of the California 2nd District Court of Appeals in May, and finally on July 2nd, 2002, the court ruled in favor of the church. So, I mean, how high up do you have to go? And if you go up to the 9th Circuit Court, you're not going to get justice, right? They don't care about freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right? Okay, so this is just one example. There's lots of them here. There's examples of teachers. Say a student brings his or her Bible to school, and this one teacher said, "This is trash." Little children, the teacher using hate speech, hating normalcy, hating the idea that people should have freedom. We shouldn't be sending our children to the front lines. What we need to do, in my opinion, is we need to privatize the public schools and make a voucher system. Actually, what I would contend is let's go ahead and let them have every advantage. Let them keep their current property and buses and everything like that. But all we need is just the money from now on, allocated per student per month. I'll go over that in a few minutes, and you'll see that. Great. The schools that are good will continue, but the schools that are bad, like they would expel a girl for having Advil in her purse, something insane like that, or throw away a student's Bibles or something like that. No, let's defund those schools, let them out of there, and let this teacher sweep floors or do something different. Okay. This is an article by Pat Buchanan, having come out earlier this week. I thought it was very interesting. I hope he does not mind. I made copies of his article to hand out to you tonight. And I don't read his editorials very often, but he does have sometimes some very interesting things to say. And I like some of his statistics in here. You see, America is right now permanently changing. And 10 or 20 years from now, the trends that are in place now, that our alarm clock that the media is not telling us about, will continue, and they will continue. The country will no longer be recognizable even 50 years from now if we don't look at what it is that's happening. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples. One of them is Muslims. Around 1980, there were almost no Muslims in America, very, very few. Then after the Iranian Revolution, many Iranians applied and were able to come to America. And I should mention, one other thing: the number of Jews in America was about 5 million, but many of them are in careers and things like that, so their portion of the population is not bigger, and so some Jews were like, well, the Christians are number one, we're number two, okay? But now the Muslims are actually number two in religion. There are between 15 to 20 million Muslims in America, and the number of Jews in America are still only about 5 million. This changes who and what America is. Now, maybe not big, not on a daily basis, but it does change the demographics. The first member of Congress who is a Muslim was recently elected. I'll talk about that more in a few minutes here. But the demographics also, Hispanics are rapidly increasing in America. Again, I'm not saying this is necessarily good or bad. It is a change. It's a permanent change, particularly depending on what people vote for and what is people's heritage. How do people perceive their heritage of who they are? So he's got here on the second page, here he's talking about in 1960 and comparing that everyone celebrated the same holidays. And today that's not necessarily the case. In fact, for some of our holidays, it's like it's no longer such a big national holiday, or only some people celebrate it. Okay, so anyway, take a look at this if you're interested. And for over 200 years, just a moment here, all the immigrants to America learned English. They came to America, whether they came from Germany or Scandinavian countries, or from Italy, or from wherever people came from China, they learned English. For kids, you learn it usually within 6 months or a year. But today, many of the Hispanics are coming to America and they're not learning English. Isn't that interesting? How come? I lived in Japan for 5 years. Before I moved there, I studied Japanese for 2 years in college, because it made sense. When in Rome, do as the Romans. If I was going to be in Tokyo, I should learn some Japanese, right? But for someone who's and I wasn't planning to live there permanently. I was just planning to live there for a couple of years or a few years. But many of the Hispanics who are coming to America are not bothering to learn English. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you what. There's a word, if I pronounce it correctly, reconquista. Reconquista. To reconquest. Reconquista. The idea that magazine I passed around, Whistleblower magazine, this is our continent, not yours. There are people with the entitlement way of thinking, and that could be any ethnic group, this entitlement way of thinking that this is owed to us. Someone has taken this from us. When I lived in Japan, I studied history in college, okay? So I love history, okay? And I was there during the first Gulf War, 1991, right in that area. And I remember the Japanese, one of the dangers in many countries, they believe what the media says, okay? It's like, what? How can you believe this stuff without questioning it? They don't have a historical background at all. And I remember them kind of lamenting, well, of course, Iraq did have Kuwait. 100 years ago, Kuwait was part of Iraq, and it was meanly taken from them. And so I stopped, and I knew this because my classes of teaching English part-time and stuff like that. It was like, so I thought about this, and I said, excuse me. I had to go around the world in my mind briefly. Except for Australia and New Zealand, can you name any other countries that still have the same borders that they had 100 years ago? And of course, they couldn't say Japan, because after the Sino-Japanese War of 1894-95, they had taken Taiwan and several other places and up into Sakhalin Island. And then in the Russo-Japanese War, 1904-1905. Anyway, America's borders are different, right? Several of the states became states during the 20th century, the last two being Alaska and Hawaii, right? Hawaii 5-0. Book them, Dano, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? We're all educated here, right? Okay, excuse me. Iraq's, whose borders are the same that there were 100 years ago? Europe's borders have been rewritten 3 or 4 times, right? And they hadn't thought about that. They didn't look at it in terms of the world perspective. Mean America is this. I'm speaking generally. Mean America has taken this and that and stuff like this, and I'm like, wait a minute. No, you're not looking at the whole picture here.